My sense is, and I don't know this, I'm not in their draft room nor in their meetings, it would not surprise me at all if he was a top 10 player on their board and that when they got to 19, they just said, you know what, we got to draft a top 10 player.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a schedule release. Wisdom Wednesday presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. We've got the civilian GOAT, Greg Cosell, in the house. You know why? Because Greg doesn't care at all about the schedule. So tomorrow, when we're talking about the schedule with Mike North, that's not Greg's day. Today is Greg's day before the schedule comes out. Want to get his thoughts on some of the guys in the news. Owusu-Koramoah for the Browns, Trey Hendrickson. Obviously, got to ask Greg about Derek Carr's retirement. Before we get into this awesome series where we're talking team and scheme for the rookie skill guys, which is amazing. Love those of you that do any of the little things that help the show, right? And help yourself. Spread the word via social media. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL, but especially at Ross Tucker Pod. I'm just telling you, it's crazy easy to just comment on any video on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or Twitter, and then I'll announce you as a winner, and I'll send you one of these awesome press passes that I still have from last season, which are amazing. Same thing if you take advantage of any of our sponsors, like the glorious Game Time app, which obviously is perfect to use tonight after the schedule release comes out. And then YouTube shout-outs are very cool. YouTube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Make sure you subscribe and turn your notifications on so you know when these shows are posted. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Okay, Greg, excited to get your thoughts on the rookie receivers, but always got to ask you about the big NFL news first. And if we assume that Derek Carr is retiring and stays retired, and by the way, some of the comments from people on my social media that act like they know more than I do always cracks me up. Like, he could have just gone on IR and got the $30 million. Really? Like, if he could have just done that, don't you think he would have done that? And if he was doing the Saints a solid, why did he keep the $10 million they just gave him in March? If it was so important to do them a solid, he could have given the $10 million back. I mean, come on. Anyway, all right, Derek. Greg, as a player, Derek Carr, let's just say he's done. How will you remember him and his career as a guy that was a second-round pick, by the way?
Yeah, he was always, Ross, and going through the years, I'd get asked about Derek Carr a lot, and obviously now that he retired, he was always a little bit of an enigma to me. I always struggled with what he was because I remember watching him coming out of college. And many might remember that his receiver in college was Davante Adams. And he had that snap delivery. He threw with velocity. He almost looked like Aaron Rodgers, the way he threw the ball. I remember when I watched him in college. And he's obviously had really good moments in the league. He was very gifted. He had mobility. There were times I felt that he was risk averse, that he wouldn't drive the ball down the field. And then there were games where I felt like, wow, he's really being aggressive now. But I'm just being honest. I always struggled with what he was. He's obviously had a very good career. This is no knock on Derek Carr. But there's a couple of quarterbacks in the league that sometimes I feel like I can't get a handle on exactly what they are. And they're good players. Like Derek Carr is one of them. Kyler Murray's another one for me that I just can't get a real good handle on. But Carr, I felt that there was always a little more there that what didn't quite come out, but that he was still a good player.
Greg, I think that's very fair. And I think the Kyler Murray comparison is spot on.
They're not the same kind of quarterback, obviously, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And what I would describe those guys is they're like almost consistently inconsistent, if that makes sense. They will have back-to-back games where they look like a top 10 quarterback. And then back-to-back games or a game where they look like a bottom 10, not even a top 20 guy. And it just, there
it's
was
not a function of talent. It's not a function of talent. They have talent.
It just, you know what? I always tell people, because people say, well, he's really talented. He's really talented. This guy, that guy. You know what separates the average from the good and the good from the great in the NFL? It's consistency.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not the talent. It's like, it's the consistency of repetitive performance.
Yeah.
You know, and neither one of those guys have gotten there. Neither one of those guys. It's a reason why neither one of them have won a playoff game yet, right? Because they get to the playoffs, if they get to the playoffs, against guys that are much more likely to have repetitive, stellar performances. And we've seen that. So great call there. I think the biggest news probably since Monday is just Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
Monday released a statement. Yesterday at practice, and I'll have more to say about the contract stuff and the Bengals and how he's going about this later in the show. But I just want to know your eval, Greg, right? So Myles Garrett just got this huge contract. Max Crosby just got this huge contract. Hendrickson's numbers
are really
would
good.
Suggest he's there with those guys and Micah Parsons. But he doesn't get talked about like that, Greg. You watch a lot of Bengals.
Sure.
What is Hendrickson? Is he up there with those guys?
Yeah, and that's because the Bengals defense overall has not been very good the last number of years. So he sort of falls into that mishmash of, hey, they're not a good defense. I think there's two parts to it. There's the part, is he as good as those guys? And what does he mean to the team? I think he's pretty close to those guys. I mean, Hendrickson has what you want to start with, Ross. You know this being an O-lineman. He has power. And when you have power and you can win with power as a pass rusher, whether it's on the outside or on the inside, that is the true starting point for pass rushers in this league. And he can win with power. And he's got a really solid build. You know, he's not heavy, but he's not like long and lean. He's really solidly built. So again, I'm not a good compare guy, but he definitely is right. You know, he's in that conversation. But the other factor is, and this is the way teams have to think, is what does he mean to the team? Because let's say he doesn't play for them. You know, let's say they end up trading him, whatever. I mean, guys don't sit out whole seasons. So what he says in May, you take that with a grain of salt. But the point is now you think, okay, what is the Bengals defense without Trey Hendrickson? Because then you're going to hear, well, they don't have anybody who can rush the quarterback. And it's going to be a problem for them because they don't have anybody who can rush the quarterback. So ultimately, it comes down to the value, because that's what ultimately the draft is about. You're trying to get better as a team. You're trying to draft players who are better than the players you have on your team. That's what it's about. They're not worried about whether, is he as good as Myles Garrett? They're not thinking like that in their draft room. They're thinking, can we get players who are better for our team? So Hendrickson has unbelievable value to the Bengals. I mean, ridiculous value to the Bengals. And without him, they can't rush the quarterback.
Right. And with the money they just gave Chase and Higgins, and they feel like, they want to get back to the playoffs and make a run this year. That's not happening without Hendrickson.
No.
And it's not like they replaced him in the draft.
I mean, keep one thing in mind. Didn't Joe Burrow last year, weren't there 3 or 4 games or 5 games, whatever the number is, it's not the middle of the season, so I can't remember every stat now, where there were a number of games where they scored 33 or more points and lost.
Right. Well, that's the other argument people make that's a dumb argument, but that our defense wasn't good with him. We can still be not good without him. We can be bad. You can be bad a lot of ways, but they did draft Shamar Stewart. They did take an edge rusher in the first round, but he's not Trey Hendrickson,
and he's got a ways to go.
You know what he needs to do? He needs to learn from Trey Hendrickson.
That is correct.
Because you mentioned the power, but I would say Hendrickson's really good with his hands too.
I agree. Well, normally the power guys really are good with their hands because you have to be able to play off contact. That's the key thing.
Okay. Let's talk the last guy, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, JOK for the Browns.
Yeah.
Put on PUP, done for the year. Greg, I hate this for multiple reasons, but one is he's like one of my favorite players in the NFL. I love watching that guy.
Yeah. Well, I think they kind of knew this was going to happen, and I think that's the reason they drafted Carson Schlesinger, because Schlesinger is a similar style player to JOK. They're athletic, they're twitchy, they're sudden, they're rangy. JOK was not a big man in terms of what you think of linebackers in the NFL, but he was a great athlete. He really had safety type movement, and I think they kind of knew that this was coming down the pike, and that's why they drafted Schlesinger, who's, as I said, stylistically a similar player.
Makes sense. All right, let's dive into some of these receivers, okay? I think people can go back and hear what Greg and I talked about after the first round, because we spend a decent amount of time. That's the beauty of podcasts or YouTube. You can go back to our post-draft episode, because I recall spending a good amount of time on Travis Hunter and that big trade,
Yep.
as well as T-Mac and Matthew Golden. I remember spending a decent amount of time on those guys. I don't know that we spent as much, Greg, on Egbuka. And I think this is an interesting one. I know you like Egbuka.
I do.
But there's a lot of people scratching their head about a team re-signing Godwin and then drafting Egbuka with the belief that they're both really, at their core, slot guys. So I was curious to ask you about that and get your thoughts on Egbuka's fit with the Bucs.
Well, first of all, I really like Egbuka, and my sense is I think he was drafted late teens, somewhere around there.
19.
Yeah, my sense is, and I don't know this, I'm not in their draft room nor in their meetings. It would not surprise me at all if he was a top 10 player on their board, and that when they got to 19, they just said, you know what, we got to draft a top 10 player. Now, I don't know that. That would be my guess. But here's the way I think of it. It was the same discussion when the Seahawks signed Cooper Kupp. The way the league has evolved and offensive coordinators have evolved is, I think, the delineation between slot and outside has decreased, because there's so many more cut splits, reduced splits, tight splits, that you can line up a receiver theoretically as your number one, your outside receiver, but because of reduced splits, he's only 5 yards from the offensive tackle. He's essentially a slot receiver, even though he's an outside receiver based on the formation. And I think you're seeing more and more of that in the league. So I think the delineation between slot and outside, the way we've thought about it for years, is changing. Just like I think the delineation between right and left offensive tackle has changed over the years. I don't think that it's a case, he's got left tackle feet, and if he doesn't have good feet, you put him at right tackle. Yeah, well, if you play right tackle, now you got to block TJ Watt. So the point is I think that delineation between slot and outside receiver is not the same as it was years ago.
You know what else I think, Greg? A couple things. First of all, they were 0-4 last year when they didn't have Mike Evans and Godwin.
Right.
Okay. So they know they need a receiver, right? Evans isn't getting any younger. Godwin coming off a major injury.
And he's 30 as well, or close to it, by the way.
Yeah. Here's the other thing I've been thinking about, though, Greg. You know how there's so much motion in the league now?
Yes, another great point.
So often these guys can start outside.
Right.
And then motion to the point where they are a slot receiver. And here's the other thing I was thinking about. Most teams will have a nickel who plays inside, who specializes in going against guys that have a two-way go and in those route concepts. If you have two quote-unquote slot guys out there, who is that guy covering? And if you're doing it by formation, they can motion to get Egbuka or Godwin matched up inside on your non-slot corner.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they can get that matchup now if they want.
No question. The point is that there's so much more, and I'm glad you mentioned motion. There's so much more formation variation now, reduced splits, motion, that it's not just old school where, hey, you've got two outside receivers who are split wide and you got a slot guy. The game's not really like that. I mean, obviously teams line up like that, every once in a while because there's so many ways to line up. But that's not just the way it is now. So, and he's an impressive guy. I mean, I remember watching him speak at the podium at the Combine, and you just knew and I'd watched his tape already by then, but I knew Egbuka right at that moment. He's going to be a 10-year great pro. The guy, he was a pro. He just, you could tell by the way he spoke.
Let's talk about the two Iowa State guys that got drafted by the Texans. The big one, Jayden Higgins in the second round, and the smaller one that everybody that comes on this show seems to love, Jaylin Noel, the third round pick. I don't know if it's Noel or Noel, for the Texans. What do you see with those guys there? Obviously, Tank Dell might be out for a while. Stephon Diggs is gone. Your thought on the Iowa State kids in Houston with C.J. Stroud?
Well, Higgins I love. Let's leave him alone for the moment. I loved Higgins when I watched him last summer from 2023 tape. I loved Higgins because he was big. I thought he moved really well. He was not just a big possession type receiver. He really moved well. Noel's a fascinating guy. Again, he's a guy that could be typecast as a slot, but he's 5'10" and a quarter, 194. It's not as if he's, keep in mind someone like Jordan Addison was 175 or give or take, and he played a lot on the outside. So Noel was 194. He runs well. His athletic testing was off the charts. I think when you watch Noel, and I watched him again, I watched him last summer too. I think he can line up anywhere in your formation, and he can run. So he's really an interesting guy. I think he gives you verticality. He's got great short area quickness. He's got sudden separation traits. So to me, he's got the traits to work either inside, where he's probably more effective, but you can line him up outside because he can run, and I think he can get on top of corners.
It's probably a size thing. I'm a little surprised he didn't go until the third round. I've had people compare him to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I've had people say that he kind of reminded him of Steve Smith Sr., which is obviously very high praise. Although Steve Smith Sr. was a third-round pick, I think.
Yeah, he's more explosive than Amon-Ra St. Brown, just purely explosive. Amon-Ra St. Brown is an incredibly nuanced player and was in a phenomenal system, which gave him the volume. But Amon-Ra St. Brown was a fourth-round pick. Again, no one thought Amon-Ra St. Brown would put up, be a volume target the way he has been in Detroit under Ben Johnson. But Noel is a more explosive athlete than Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay, what about in the second round? I also want to get your thoughts on Jack Bech with the Raiders and where he fits in, because there's some people that think he's similar stylistically to Jacoby Myers. I mean, is this another example, Greg, of another team kind of having two bigger slot guys?
Well, again, then you get into, what they're going to do. Chip Kelly's there. So again, you're going to get into what is he going to do from a formation standpoint. But Bech is a guy whose tape I really, really liked. He was refined. He was nuanced. He understood how to run routes. When he had free access off the ball, he was really, really good. So now that makes you think that he could be a movement receiver. You put him in motion. You wouldn't say he's twitchy, but he's big. And this guy is physical. This guy is one of those guys that catches everything. He's physical. He's seamless in his transition from receiver into run after catch, where his physicality and his competitive toughness was a big, big factor. He's got size, he's got hands, he's got physicality. He's super competitive. He can run after catch. I came away watching this kid thinking that there were similarities to Puka Nacua stylistically. And people have to remember, it's easy now to say, oh, you're nuts, look at Nacua. But, Nacua was a fifth-round pick. And again, it's the way he's deployed in the Rams offense. They don't ask Nacua to line up at boundary X and win one-on-one on the outside. They don't ask him to do that. That's not, it's not what he is. And I thought Bech was somewhat similar stylistically to Nacua when I finished watching his tape.
What about Luther Burden with the Bears, Greg? What do you think the fit is there in Ben Johnson's offense?
I got to tell you, I loved Luther Burden's tape, for 2 years. And I was surprised. Again, they had quarterback issues this year at Mizzou, so he did not have the big numbers that he did in 2023. But I think Luther Burden is an explosive athlete. I think he's a 3-level dimension. It's interesting that Ben Johnson is now in Chicago, and he drafted him because in my notes, and obviously I don't know who's going to draft who when I do my evaluations, but I said while Burden may not have the terrifying speed of a Jamison Williams, the tape clearly showed that he can take the top off the defense and be a vertical dimension. I could see Burden, and again, I don't know Luther Burden, so now it comes down to his approach to being a pro. This is what I don't know, and this is critically important. But I think Luther Burden in Ben Johnson's offense fills the Amon-Ra St. Brown role really, really well, and is a more explosive athlete.
Oh, because I thought it was more the Jamison Williams role.
No, I think he can be. Yeah, I think he can be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, they may see him as Jamison Williams because of the other receivers. So that's a great point because they have more and they have Odunze. And, again, I'm not sure how he sees all that. I could also see Odunze filling the Amon-Ra St. Brown role as well. But, we'll see how that plays out. But Luther Burden is a really gifted receiver. And when they made that pick after they picked Colston Loveland in the first round, I mean, my mind just started thinking about what Ben Johnson, who's obviously phenomenal, how he's going to do all this, and he's got a lot of toys to play with.
Last guy, Greg, Trey Harris for the Chargers.
Yeah, Trey Harris, I kept going back and forth on him. He's long. Some guys in college, Ross, you know this. You do college games. Some guys in college, they win vertically. But then when you watch their tape, you think to yourself, are they really going to do that in the NFL? Like, are they going to be vertical guys in the NFL? And I kind of came away from his tape wondering about that. And I'm not saying 40 times or, the be-all and end-all, but then when he ran a 4.54 40, it struck me as, maybe watching the tape and my interpretation of the tape was right. We don't know that till he plays in the league, but there were times I thought there was more to his game that was on the tape, and other times I thought, I'm not sure if this guy can win vertically. So I kept going back and forth on him. I didn't think he really had an extra gear as a vertical receiver. Now, he's got length. He's over 6'2", but and his athletic testing beside the 40 time was pretty good. So we'll see. They obviously think by where they drafted him that because they don't really have an X receiver. So I think that because McConkey's not a true X as good as he is. So I think they view him as their boundary X, and I'd be very curious if that's what he is. I'm just not certain.
Based on the news, we will do either running backs or tight ends next week. I'm loving finding out what Greg thinks of these top drafted rookie skill guys in their new schemes. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.
The schedule is being released tonight, which means almost immediately after that, go to the Game Time app and start to see how much the tickets are for these games in your city, internationally. For those of you, there's a bunch of international games that have been announced over the last couple of days. We'll get to some of that today. Right now, you can get last-minute deals up to 60% off buying for concerts, comedy, theater. I'm getting tickets to Post Malone and Jelly Roll thanks to Game Time. They've got the view from the seats, the lowest price guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets or NFL game tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ROSS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem code ROSS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Lowest price, last minute tickets, guaranteed. I love when the NFL schedule gets released. It's like you're planning when you're going to drink Labatt Blue and drink beer. You now know, Bills fans especially, but all of you, when you can do it. And then go to the website, snap a photo of your receipt, upload it instantly to rack up points for exclusive merch. I already got the incredible fridge. The next thing, I need to get that bag. I need to get the cooler bag. It's buy beer, get gear. Go to rewards.labattusa.com to sign up.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, we're going to start something that you and Greg talked about earlier. Bengals defensive end Trey Hendrickson, he released a statement regarding no communication with the Bengals on his contract and then talked about it at practice.
Couple things here. We talked with him at the Super Bowl. I told him the Bengals are a tough organization. He cut me off and wanted to just talk positively about them. I think the one thing that jumps out to me so far is that, unfortunately, in the NFL, a lot of times, contract-wise, nice guys finish last. And I think it's like, I forget what movie it is, but I think it's time for Trey Hendrickson to realize it's time to not be nice. And then the other thing is weird to me that his head coach, Zach Taylor, texted him 30 days before the minicamp to say you'll be fine if you're not there. Usually they make the front office the bad guy, and the front office relays that to the agent. For the head coach to do that directly to the defensive end is not how most teams do it. I don't know what the Bengals are thinking. That's not good. Keep the coach away from the contract stuff.
So it's Roadhouse is what you're thinking of. Well,
yes.
I want you to be nice until it's time not to be nice.
Yeah.
Browns, they signed DeMonte Casey and Rayshon Jenkins, and then, as you mentioned earlier, they put JOK on the PUP list, ending his season with a neck injury.
Have you seen Roadhouse?
I've seen Patrick Swayze, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to watch the whole thing. Homework, okay? It's an American classic. Be nice until it's time to not be nice. Listen, JOK, that's a big loss. Clearly, as Greg said, they knew it was coming. That's why they drafted Schlesinger, but that's a bummer.
And the NFL has released lots of scheduled games early. Most interesting, the Vikings, they're staying in Europe for back-to-back games.
It's really funny to see the reaction from some people to this. This is a positive for the Vikings, okay? When they play the Browns in London after playing the Steelers the week before, they'll have already been there. They'll have adjusted to the time change. The Browns will not have. And also, instead of having 9 road games like everybody else in the NFC, true road games, they only have 7. They play 2 neutral site games. That's a huge advantage for the Vikings. It is schedule release week in the NFL. What does that mean? It's the perfect time for you to book hotel rooms, for you to figure out what games you're going to go to with your buddies. The good news is you don't have to figure out what you're going to drink. You're going to drink Smirnoff. It's the world's #1 vodka. It's an official vodka partner of the NFL and this show, which I greatly appreciate. That tells you how smart the people are at Smirnoff that they sponsor this show. Grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer. Here's the key. Head to Smirnoff.com to find recipes of delicious cocktails perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff #21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. Boy, you got to check my social media. The video we just posted of that mom with her sons, holy crap, that almost makes me cry. myfrontpagestory.com. Backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.